afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our session this afternoon for our Inclusive Digital Economy stream. We are going to be looking at a presentation from Yaliwe Soko, the Chairwoman of the United Africa Blockchain Association. She'll be speaking about the evolution of distributed ledger technology and its application in the developing world. Unfortunately, Yaliwe could not join us due to technical difficulties, but I am joined by Nolwazi Hlope, who is Deputy Director at Digital Frontiers for our Financial Regulation and Supervision stream. She'll be helping us to field the questions. So do feel free to lodge your questions at the bottom right corner in our live discussion, and we will attend to those after the presentation.
Thank you. Hello, everyone.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Yaliwe Soko. I chair the United Africa Blockchain Association, and I'm glad to be speaking to you today and just sharing my perspective on distributed ledger technologies in the developing world. So today's focus will be on blockchain technology. So we'll just start with an introduction to blockchain. For those of you that are aware, I think it's great. And for those that are not, I think it will be a learning curve. So today I'm going to talk about blockchain. What is blockchain? Blockchain is a global and public ledger without a central database that can be tampered with. The distributed ledger technology that allows information to be exchanged among several parties but not altered. So how this works is that like I said, it's a database, right? A blockchain, a ledger is a database. The only difference between blockchain and a regular database is that blockchain is public. It's usually public, though there are some private blockchains, but usually blockchains are public and they're open source. As much as the information is public, it cannot be tampered with. So once information has been entered onto the blockchain, it cannot be changed. And also, there's another aspect to this technology that makes it special is that it has no point of failure. So I don't know if all of us remember, not too long ago, we had some issue with Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, and all these other applications that are controlled by formerly Facebook, but now Meta. So what was the reason? The reason the entire world was experiencing that disruption is because this type of server is controlled by one central organization. So with blockchain, what happens is that there are people sitting in different parts of the world, and once information is entered, as long as they're part of that particular blockchain protocol or network, they receive the same copy of information at the same time. And they are actually these computers that are validating these transactions and witnessing these transactions. So should one computer not work properly, the other computers will continue to work perfectly. So it has no point of failure. And then another aspect to blockchain is cryptocurrency. I think a lot of people have asked, what is cryptocurrency? Or there's been a confusion between the two. So whenever you speak blockchain, people speak Bitcoin. So I'm just going to clarify a little bit on what cryptocurrency is and what is the difference between blockchain and cryptocurrency. So a cryptocurrency is an internet-based digital asset designed to work as a medium of exchange that uses strong cryptography to secure financial transactions, control the creation of additional units, and verify the transfer of assets. So unlike other medium of exchanges, cryptocurrency uses cryptography. So this means that, so I'll give you just a little example, right? So let's say this is, like we said, the blockchain is usually an open blockchain and transactions are going back and forth, and people who, whenever they go to the blockchain explorer, they're able to see the transactions that are coming in and going out. But what they're not able to see are the parties that are transacting, right? Even if I am part of this network, I'm just able to see the transactions and some maybe codes or some, some form of hexadecimal codes, but I'm not able to see. So there is that cryptographic aspect that even the information is only between the two parties that are transacting, that even if a third party had to see, most of that information will appear meaningless to the third party. So that's what secures transactions and also protects the identity of the people that are transacting. And it also controls the creation of additional units. So if you look at other medium of exchanges, such as fiat currency, which is your regular paper money or whatever it is, whether it's coins, you find that money can be printed, fiat can be printed at random, right? There's no controlled creation of additional units. But with cryptocurrency, for example, Bitcoin, there's only 21 million Bitcoin that will ever exist, and there's no other additional units of Bitcoin that will be produced. So it is controlled, it is deterministic, and everybody knows. And so far, you can see that there's about 16 million or over 16 million Bitcoin that has been mined already, right? And there's also a verification of the transfer of assets. So people can verify and validate that this transfer is accurate, the people that are on that particular network or the people that want to just check out the Explorer. So that's a little bit about blockchain and cryptocurrency. And just to look at the difference, I would say blockchain is kind of the platform that enables the creation of cryptocurrency. So that is the difference. Cryptocurrency exists because the blockchain exists. So as you remember, I told you in the beginning, we'll be talking about distributed ledger technologies in the developing world. And today's focus will be why blockchain in Africa, right? So I put forward a few pointers. This is what blockchain could potentially do for us. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is improvement of cross-border supply chains. The implementation of blockchain in combination with smart contracts could help fix Africa's supply chain inefficiencies by firstly reducing costs and also kind of removing a lot of middlemen. So there are numerous middlemen within the supply chain system, and blockchain will be able to help us to reduce costs and numerous middlemen. So transaction could be just between the transacting party and the receiving party. And also with smart contracts, the smart contracts would be able to execute themselves, that there's no need to engage a lot of parties, including a lot of maybe legal firms and other things like that. Another good point, maybe another advantage, is the voting system. So as we all know, Africa is known for corruption and mismanagement in leadership and government. So it comes down to a system that is easily corruptible and usually monopolized. I think there's been a lot of talk about rigging of votes and all these other things. So implementing a blockchain-based voting system will be able to help us mitigate some of those things, because once information is entered, let's say I entered as, Yaliwe Soko, voter identification number, this and this and this and this, I cannot vote twice, and no additional votes will be brought into the system because that will be invalidated by the actual blockchain. So it would help us in that aspect. And another part is the healthcare system improvements. So blockchain could help our healthcare systems, as well as preserve the privacy of the patients, while also promoting transparency within the industry. So I'll just talk a little bit about a very maybe important issue that we face sometimes within the healthcare system, that is counterfeit medicines, right? So I once heard of, I think I was in Zambia at one point, and this was on radio, and they were talking about counterfeit medicines that were brought into the country and they were administered to patients. So if the origin of this medication was recorded on the blockchain, they would have known that that is not the right medication that was supposed to be given to the patients. And I always say maybe that was a result of corruption. Somebody directed funds the wrong way and actually authorized counterfeit medicines, or maybe it was just ignorance. But if we have healthcare systems on blockchain, it would actually help us mitigate some of those things. And also energy supply regulation, blockchain could help by recording all transactions that record energy supply according to demand. You can see what we're facing right now. So some of those things would be mitigated, and we'll be able to see and regulate the energy supply within the countries and the demand within the countries. And also another important aspect, which is land registrations, because land is a huge issue in Africa, and oftentimes there's a lot of land disputes. So if all land registrations were on the blockchain, they could be verifiable, and they could be transparent, and the right owners of the land will be able to be identified without the back and forth. So these are some of the reasons why blockchain would be a good technology to be implemented in systems in Africa. And just here we're talking about why should Africans care, right? Why should we care as Africans? So Africans. One thing we should know is that Africa has the youngest generation in the world and the highest rate of unemployment and poverty. And you can see by 2030, Africa will have the highest workforce than China and the highest workforce in the world by 2050. It is time for Africa to build solutions for its problems. And also, as the world is moving forward, it would be great for Africans to be stakeholders of some of the solutions, because usually solutions are created for Africans, but Africa is not, I always say Africa is not a one-size-fits-all type of environment. There are different solutions to different problems. So if Africans get to understand how some of these things work, they'll be able to see where these solutions would work within, whether it's within their communities or within their departments. And then those solutions will be built for Africans, for African problems, and also just making Africans global citizens, I would say, without having to travel the world. I do personally work with a lot of organizations outside of Africa, but I'm based in Africa. As you can see, a long time ago, if I had to work with people in the United States, I would have to travel. But because of technology and emerging technologies like blockchain, Africans are being given a chance to be able to interact with the Western world and maybe other parts of the world and do work there and also exchange information. So we should care, because we have to be stakeholders and not only users of solutions that have been created for us. So how do Africans get included, right? There are so many ways in which we can get included as Africans. So far, the blockchain ecosystem in Africa is booming. Young people are coming up with different solutions. Young people are coming up with different organizations that are looking into this thing. So you can look at blockchain organizations and associations that work together to educate Africans and create awareness. So you could be part of things like that. And also, Africans can get included by Africans being given especially the youth, being provided with blockchain skill sets, because education is a primary tool for establishing a blockchain and distributed ledger technology ecosystem. That's DLT. So I'll just talk about United Africa Blockchain Association, known as UABA. So UABA intends to equip each and every stakeholder with the best blockchain education, employability, acumen, and tools to shape Africa's future. So I'll get a little bit deeper into what UABA is doing, but this is how Africans can get involved, and also taking up blockchain courses. I know DFI is offering blockchain and cryptocurrency courses right now, which is very fundamental and informative. So just getting involved and learning a little bit more on what's happening around the world in this space. And just to finish it off, I spoke a little bit about UABA. So I'll talk about UABA's vision. That's the organization that I'm representing today. So United Africa Blockchain Association is a non-profit organization that has been formed for the promotion of the adoption of blockchain technology in Africa and creating partnerships and networks that deliver on life-changing blockchain projects. So the main goals are to educate and prepare Africa for the fourth industrial revolution, develop local skills through innovation and incubation programs, support and promote African startups, and build strategic relationships with government bodies and international partners. And then how can Africans get involved? So United Africa Blockchain Association, or UABA, supports the creation of a blockchain and DLT ecosystem based on 8 common goals of harmonious coexistence and progress, which are, so our first is education, because I believe an educated continent, or we believe an educated continent is an empowered continent. And also people are often afraid of what they don't understand. So the first part is education, and I might skip to the others before I go to financial inclusion. And with education, it's also skills development. As we develop skills, there will be opportunities for jobs, and then we have all these things coming in as fair and efficient trade when people know how to build tools that help with supply chain management and other things. And people get sovereign identity. There are a lot of people without identity because of these tools that are going to be built by the people who've learned about blockchain and the solutions that it can provide to certain African problems, which could potentially bring about financial inclusion, and lastly, help us alleviate poverty, since we're looking at the SDGs in this conference today. So this is all I had for you. Thank you so much for taking time and listening to me. So I'm going to open up the floor for questions and answers. So feel free to ask questions. I'm here to answer them. Thank you so much.
Welcome back, Nolwazi. Very interesting presentation. What are your initial thoughts just hearing what Yaliwe was sharing with us?
Thank you, Samke. You know, thinking that the title of our presentation, or this Yaliwe's presentation, was looking at the evolution of distributed ledger technologies and its applications in developing economies. It's nice that she started from blockchain, because that was our first experience of distributed ledger technologies and leading up to cryptocurrencies, because we all saw the boom of Bitcoin and everyone was rushing and getting excited into that. And her explaining now that we've seen the use cases of blockchain just explode to voter registration systems. And I saw that she listed digital identity, and that we've seen that blockchain has also further applications for regional integration. And from now the institution that she's working in, the not-for-profit, you know, I've gleaned quite a few lessons from her presentation myself. So it's interesting to see how blockchain has just exploded over time, a short period of time, to have so many applications that are much needed in the developing world, and have already been harnessed by developed countries around the world.
I think what was interesting for me as well was just the various applications, like you mentioned, like from land registries, health records, trade finance documents, etc. I just wondered at the complexity of tokenizing these physical assets is, in the end, you have to create a network of trusted validators. So people have to validate that these assets exist in reality. And then, so if you have these trusted validators, you need to connect them through a trustless blockchain network. And I say trustless because it's an area that we're not familiar with as yet. It's a developing and emerging focus area that is not also controlled by anyone. So what is the incentive really for someone who's going to be that validator to work in the space? So for me, it's really a developing space. And unfortunately, because Yaliwe couldn't be here, we can't necessarily delve into that so much. But I'm grateful that you're here, Nolwazi. Perhaps you can shed some light for us on regional integration in African data governance being the next frontier to enable business to operate across multiple jurisdictions in the most cost-effective way without compromising data protection and privacy. What is the role of blockchain cryptocurrency on this?
I think I'd start that discussion from what we're already seeing with the Africa Free Trade Agreement. So that has started the regional integration for the African Union to start trading with for our countries in the African Union to start trading with each other, to lower the barriers to trade. But still, different countries have different regulatory regimes that must be respected. Some countries don't have data protection laws yet. Some of them have them before parliaments as bills. Some of them have them, they haven't been enacted yet. Some of them are in the process of enacting them. Some have been enacted, like in South Africa, POPI is now enforced. You know, so when it comes to data governance and data sharing, it's a bit tricky because some countries or some regions, like, you know, West Africa has one central bank, can already start sharing data with each other. Some are in the process of getting their data protection laws together. And even then, they're still at the jurisdiction level. They haven't harmonized at the regional level. So it's layers of development that still need to be made. And countries need to be cognizant that that takes time. Because if you're writing an act, that still has to go through parliament, and that takes time before you can now put it into action, because now maybe that Data Protection Act requires a data regulator to be established, and that's also going to take time. But with the African Free Trade Agreement, that might facilitate the regional integration, and blockchain can play a role here in the trade finance, which might actually help with trade-based money laundering. This is just me now thinking as a former regulator, because now the transactions will be recorded, and this is an immutable recording mechanism, you can't go back and change the transactions that have been recorded there. And it'll be easier to track the transactions as regulators may have access of, but at the same time, we say blockchain. Blockchain is a type of distributed ledger. Yeah. And it's not, so a distributed ledger is a technological infrastructure of protocols that allow simultaneous access, validation, and record updating. So a blockchain is a form of DLT, but not all DLTs are blockchain. So okay. There could be a DLT that could be used for regional integration for business, and where now it's the certain level, the certain permission levels, where certain people can see certain information, and that way there's a certain level of privacy, and then there's controls that can be put in for monitoring money laundering and so on and so forth via trade-based money laundering that is very popular amongst money laundering offenses, and that would be useful. But now coming back to the regional integration part, the African Trade Fair Agreement could be an avenue to aid that whilst we wait for the data governance to align itself along that same route. Exactly. So there's application for that as well. But at the same time now, the whole African Union needs to decide on the DLT standards that they will use for their trade. So there needs to be a DLT or distributed ledger guideline or standard for the African Union that needs to be developed, and that alone on its own will take time. But it will be a very useful piece of paper once it's developed to help the region be able to trade in a more cost-effective way without compromising certain pieces of information, especially on the data protection and privacy rights. That's important that be put in those guidelines, that they know who has access to certain levels of information. Because in Yaliwe's presentation, she mentioned that with blockchain, some of them are public, some of them are permissioned, some of them are hybrid. So those decisions would need to be made in the design of this DLT for the regional integration. Will it be public to all governments? Will it be permissioned to certain levels of governments? How will we design this blockchain, this DLT that we'll use for our business operations across the union?
I'm going to try and attempt to answer Christopher's question. He says, please shed more light on the possibility of using blockchain to curtail procurement fund case of Zambia. Unfortunately, Christopher, I don't know the Zambia case, but I do know that blockchain can assist in automating the transfer funds through important checks. So when you have certain checks in place within the transferring of funds, only certain transactions can take place. So only predetermined amounts of funds can be transferred and to only previously accredited suppliers. So that automatically means that corruption that normally occurs with procurement will be curbed. It's also valuable when you're doing supply chain monitoring and management, because you can track and trace where money is going. A typical use case scenario that I know of, which I don't know if it was implemented in Zambia, but certainly it has been implemented during the COVID-19 pandemic, is the tracing of emergency food distributions. So that means that you can have transparent tracking that, like this large scale corruption that takes place with government distributed food packages, was curbed because of blockchain technologies. If you want to share in the chat box about your experience or your knowledge of Zambia, please do so. I'm sure we could learn from that example as well. Now, Nolwazi, circling back to you, when we talk about distributed ledger technology and its implications for digital identity, I know you're well placed to give us an idea, of what the linkages are. Could you tell us a bit more about that?
So I'm glad you said distributed ledger technology, because as I said before, blockchain is a subset of DLT. That's why even when they talk about CBDCs these days, they'll say some countries use a DLT approach or a non-DLT approach. They won't say a country use blockchain or non-blockchain. So, DLT has application for digital identity. And it can work, and to solve these particular three issues, it can help the verify and know who issued the credential based on the identifier and the cryptographic signature. It can help the verifier know it can help the verifier verify who claims the data. So it can help the verifier verify that you are who you say you are. It can help the issuer periodically update that the details haven't been revoked. So there's no fraud of people who are committing insurance fraud of killing themselves and then trying to come back to life. So, but at the same time, with using DLT for digital identity, you must keep in mind the core principles of identification as published by the World Bank with the three pillars of inclusion, design, and governance. So and then comes risks against those when you use DLT for digital identity, because then the main risk that comes that I want to focus on is vendor lock-in. If you're going to be using DLT for digital identity, which goes against one of the key principles of identification from the World Bank under design. So that's why we've got your MOSIPs and OSIA, which MOSIP offers open source and OSIA offers open standards. Actually, MOSIP offers open source and open standards. OSIA offers open standards for digital identity, so that there is no vendor lock-in. Because what happens, you get yourself into vendor lock-in, that vendor goes under 10 years later as a government. What are you going to do for your citizens? How are you going to update the identity system? DLT also, the challenge there is now you have to think about your ledger. Is it public? It can't be public. Yeah. There's privacy issues. Now you have to think about cybersecurity challenges, identity, data encryption, backup, smart contracts, the certificate management. It becomes a big challenge. Whereas with your open source, they already come packaged with all of these modules that will help you. Obviously, it's open source, but it's not free because it still needs to be customized to your context. So a resolution is that DID can be used in a hybrid system, and that can include a central or distributed non-DLT or DLT data system. It depends on the country. There's no right or wrong answer. A country has to choose what works for their specific context, but they need to understand and weigh the risks and benefits to see what will work for them. But one thing is you do want to avoid vendor lock-in as a country, because we've seen technology is expanding exponentially. What are you going to do when your vendor shuts down in 15 years?
Sure. Okay, one last question that we've been given here by our audience members because we're running out of time. And the question is Africa's infrastructure ready? Well, I think, like Nolwazi just mentioned now, context specific, but if I could give you a few African examples where the infrastructure was there and was present and it was used. For example, Tanzania in 2018, they used blockchain technology to get rid of ghost workers. Nigeria's customs service adopted blockchain technology to reduce their corruption. In Ghana, blockchain is used to create a trusted and decentralized digital ledger of land records. So, we have all of these use case scenarios. In SA, we've got Project Coca. In Ethiopia, we've got a supply chain that is being also more efficient because of these technologies. So the question of whether infrastructure is available, infrastructure, I think, is available, and it can obviously just develop moving forward. And I think that is the end of our session because we've run out of time. I want to thank you, Nolwazi, for helping us with the session, giving us and lending us your expertise. And thanks to Yaliwe as well for her presentation. And thank you to the participants that were here listening to us and asking questions.
Thank you, everyone. And thank you for having me, Samke. Always a pleasure.